Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Alhamdulillah, this is now episode 78 of the podcast The Forward. Myself, Brother Mahdi Locke, I'm joined today by al-Hajj Abu Ja'far al-Hanbali.
Salam alaikum.
And Alhamdulillah, we are coming together after quite a while to do a podcast. There's been a few things to take care of in the background, but Alhamdulillah, we're here, and today we're going to talk about Imam al-Bouti's book on the approach to human civilization in the Qur'an. So just for an update for listeners, this book is available in the UK, it's available in Southeast Asia, in Singapore and in Malaysia, and it's recently just become available in North America. There's one bookshop in Canada that's now storing it. So to get the word out again, and also to flesh out the book more, because I don't think I've done that so thoroughly yet, we're going to get into it. So I will let al-Hajj Abu Ja'far take it from here.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulil Kareem. Wa ba'd. So, Alhamdulillah, I wanted to, before getting into the book, I wanted to kind of look at the background of the book. In particular, to look at the death of Imam al-Bouti, because it's so pivotal to what we have looked at of his written legacy. I can say for a fact, I remember where I was at the time this happened. We just finished a tafsir class at the Institute. I think it was Jumad al-Akhirah, maybe the 24th or something like that. And we were there at the Institute, and I remember getting the phone call from Sayyid Jalal telling me about a bomb having gone off and the Imam that, and my legs were they just gave out. I remember I had to sit down. Everything that night from that point was just ruined. Tell me what that moment was like for you.
Okay, I remember this. This was 7 years ago, going now back. This is 7 years. So the Gregorian calendar is like March 23rd.
1424, wasn't it?
1424, 2013 in the Gregorian calendar. So I was actually in Jeddah, but I was flying back to the UK at the time. There was a family wedding at the time, and I had a break from work. So I found out that evening. I think I was at the family house up north in Bradford, and I just sat down in the living room. It was one of my brothers-in-law actually came in and said, "Oh, you heard there was a bomb attack in Syria, there's an explosion, and Sheikh al-Bouti's dead."
SubhanAllah.
And so I remember I went upstairs, I checked my laptop.
So you want to double check this?
Double
I'm
check.
not sure, because there's so many conspiracies.
Yeah. So I checked, and I saw it was confirmed, and then I spoke to Mahmoud. At that time, and that's his grandson. I didn't know he was a grandson at the time.
Okay, so you actually spoke to the grandson of Imam al-Bouti?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I spoke to him about it, and that was devastating. I just had to close the door, go to my room, and just cry. And this is what I had to do. I was really, really because I was.
I mean, you've been up until that point. You've been translating maybe dozens of like fatawa.
Fatawa and khutbahs,
things like this. So it's like, what was that like to just realize that like that chapter, in terms of transmitting like live data, his live khutbahs were there every week, like that the door had closed on that part of your life in terms of transmitting live information. Anything you did from that point was going to have to be from previously recorded material. Like what was that like?
Well, it was. I mean, obviously, because I just I was only maybe 8 months prior to that I'd started making contact with the Nassim Hisham website. I was in regular contact with Brother Mahmoud. Well, I hadn't drawn the connection yet that he was actually part of the family, right? He was just this wonderful brother that was running the website, and we were
greetings to them as well. Greetings to the brothers in the Nassim Hisham website.
Yeah, mashallah. And so we were going back and forth, and he would ask me to translate something, and I'd have translated something and say, "Listen, I've put this on my blog. Would you like to put it on the English Nassim Hisham website?" So, and I just moved out to Jeddah, and I was hoping, even though despite the war and everything, I was hoping, inshallah, that something will come about, and I'll get to meet the Imam one day. So my aspirations were high that even though I'd known about the Imam for so long, and I've been doing his work, doing his books, not his fatwa and his fatwa and his khutbah had been translated for like years at that point. There was always that lingering hope that one day. I think the closest I got was, I think I told Mahmoud in one email, I said, listen, if you see the Imam, just give him my salams, ask him to make dua for me. And he got back and he said, yeah, he did. I told him to make dua for you. So that that hit like a ton of bricks. And the odd thing was, you know, I didn't know that Mahmoud was the grandson at that time, but I said to him in an email, I said, SubhanAllah, I just feel like my own grandfather's died. That's what I feel. I feel my own grandfather's passed away because what it was. And then that same day, Ustad Ali Filali, he called me from Morocco. He called me from Morocco and he said, you know, I just want to give my ta'ziyah to you because I know. Because the two of us, we spent like a good couple of years like reading al-Kawniyyah and al-Kawniyyah together.
Oh yeah, that's right. You did the book with him.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned to me at some point you were doing the book together, and he came to a part and he actually started crying because he read some part that like really affected him.
Yeah, because we were reading. We were reading through. There was a few incidents. It all happened like within a week. It was really interesting because we were reading about qada and qadar, and first of all, what Ustad Filali, because his specialty is usul al-fiqh. I said that's his bread and butter. He loves usul al-fiqh. So immediately from reading al-Kawniyyah al-Kawniyyah, is he said, wait, this is like theology written by an usuli. So he really loved it. He was just really, really enjoying it. And we got to qada and qadar, and he said, I've never seen anyone explain this so clearly. This is just beautiful. And then when we got onto the chapter about seeing Allah in the hereafter, and Imam al-Bouti started like putting forth the ayat and the ahadith and explaining the matter,
fleshing out the proofs,
and that was when Ustad Filali. Now his nature, Ustad Filali, like he's tall, he's like ramrod straight. You know, he's very imposing. He's one of those people like
sort of a stoic.
Yes. Yeah, he's one of those people like when you're walking with him, you feel like really safe. Right? Like it's like you're walking with your dad. You know, it's like
it's a strong personality.
Yeah. Right. Right. I remember I had to walk with him. My wife came with us actually because we had to walk. Cause I was going to get like one of these shahada certificates because I was going to go for Umrah, and so he took us to like the main office and everything. Right. And that's what my wife actually said to me. She's like, "Wow, it's like we're walking with my father." You know, that's what you feel like. You know, that's the kind of how he makes you feel.
Yeah.
Because mashallah, he's I think he's maybe a good 25 years older than me or something like that. So, but when we got to that section, we were reading about that time, seeing Allah in the hereafter. You know, he just and the way we were doing class, he was actually reading the book to me. That's how he wanted. He was reading out to me, and I would just interrupt him and ask him questions as and when. And he was reading, and then he just stopped, and he just said, "Asif." Put his head down, and he had to just needed a minute just to let some tears flow out, and he just had to think and reflect on it, and then he said, "Okay, let's continue." Because it was really beautiful. And then we got to this beautiful bit in that same bab. We got to this beautiful bit where Imam al-Shafi'i, it's with one of his students, Rabi'a. There's two Rabi'as. One of them Rabi'as. I'm not sure which one. And Rabi'a says that Imam al-Shafi'i got a letter from the Sa'id that was asking about seeing Allah in the hereafter. Right? It was asking about this question. So Imam al-Shafi'i, he answers the question, and he says, and he quotes Surah Al-Mutaffifin, ayah 15, كَلَّا إِنَّهُمْ عَنْ رَبِّهِمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَمَحْجُوبُونَ. Right? And he says, obviously, if some people are going to be veiled from Allah on the Day of Judgment out of His wrath, out of His sakht and His ghadab, then obviously there are going to be another group of people on the Day of Judgment who are going to see Allah out of His fadl and His rahmah and His karam.
Otherwise, what's the difference between these two groups?
Yeah, exactly. Right? So when we read that, Ustad Filali, being the usuli, he clicks on it and says, see, he's using mafhum mukhalafa. Right? This is beautiful. Yeah. And he said, and then he said this. Now, I actually said this to Brother Mahmoud when I met him, mashallah. But Ustad Filali, he gave his statement. I'll never forget it. He was really happy when he read that, and he said, عندما أقرأ مالك أنا سعيد, وعندما أقرأ الشافعي أنا أسعد. He said, when I read Malik, I'm happy, but when I read Shafi, I'm happier. See, because he said, فما فات عن مالك وجد عند الشافعي.
Yeah.
كأنه امتداد لمالك. He said, like, so whatever is like missing from Malik, you'll find it with Shafi'i, as if he's an extension of Malik.
Yeah. The continuance.
All right. So and that's coming from a Maliki.
Yeah.
I didn't put those words in his mouth.
SubhanAllah.
So we had spent so much time like with the Imam, with his books, and then when the Syrian fitan kicked off, and so many people were like in favor of these revolutions and saying, oh yeah, overthrow this ruler, overthrow that ruler.
People were actually coming out against the Imam.
Imam. And it was happening to spread to other countries. And then now Morocco, they tried to spread this revolutionary stuff in Morocco. It didn't go anywhere because Moroccans were like, listen, there's corruption, but we like our king.
Yeah.
We're not overthrowing this king. No.
Sure.
No, there's corruption that needs to be addressed. But we like our system. We like our king. We generally like the royal family. We don't have these issues. Corruption, yes, but not this. So it was very, very easy for Moroccans to understand where Imam al-Bouti was coming from, to understand his position. And it was I remember the date in the Gregorian calendar. It was like April 25th, 2011. I remember that date where Imam al-Bouti came on national TV in Syria and addressed the people. And he quoted this hadith. He said, I think it's in Sahih Muslim. It says, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, please. He said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تخرجوا للجهاد تحت راية عمية. Like don't go out for jihad under an unnamed
banner you don't know.
No, yeah, and he gave the shot of it. He said, لا تعرفوا من يحملوها. You don't know who's carrying that banner. You're going out for under a banner, and you don't know who's carrying the banner. He says, so he said, like who's telling you to go out? Is it someone on Facebook? Someone on Twitter? What are you reading, a blog? Like who's telling you this stuff? And I remember like sitting in class and telling him that, and he got so happy, like kissed his own hand. He's like, that's beautiful. So we had spent so much time poring over the Imam's book, going over the Imam's book, and just talking about him in general and other points. And then, obviously after that Creed book, we went into like fiqh and usul and other matters. So, yeah, so on the day when the Imam was martyred, he called me and he just said, I just want to give my ta'ziyah to you because I know from all the time we spent together, I just know how much he meant to you. Yeah. So I hope you're well, and may Allah grant, reward the Imam and grant him the highest blessing in paradise, and so on and so forth. So, and then the day after, I think that was a Friday, was the day after, Mahmoud sent me an email from his dad. It was a message. It was a request from his dad. Sheikh Tawfiq sent me an email right away saying, we have an urgent statement from the Imam's family, and we need to get it out into English ASAP. So here you go. So it was like a one-page statement, and I translated that right away. I put it on my blog, and it was just clarifying all the issues. It's like, no, the Imam does not have any links to Turkey. He was never planning in Turkey. The Imam was always going to stay in Syria. That was his home. He never any intention of going anywhere else. So those
all these things were sort of swirling around him.
Yeah.
At the time of his martyrdom, there were all these rumors that were sort of swirling around like a dust cloud that had to sort of be. They had to sort of be dispelled. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what they did in that comment. And then they also made reference to a certain satellite TV station based in Qatar, and they said this is a channel that's been known for pumping out lies. Because there's a name I don't want to mention, but it's also clear that there was a certain scholarly figure who goes an agitator who goes on that channel, and he's the guy who actually, in quote unquote, gave the death warrant. I mean, gave the death order. And said that
legitimized it.
Yeah, legitimized it. He said all these people need to be killed, and these rulers need to be killed, and they need to be killed, and so on and so forth.
Like ulama al-sultan.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what happened at that time, and that statement came out, and obviously people just did not understand where the Imam. A lot of people didn't understand where the Imam was coming from, like regarding his position on the Syrian conflict. And I remember it was sometime after that, maybe a year or so after that, I actually read his whole book on al-Jihad, called al-Jihad for Islam. Yeah. So how do you understand it? How do we practice it? And that book was written, I think, initially in the early 90s, like 1992. I think it was published in 1993. He taught it in 1996 in Jam al-Iman. And that was when the Algerian crisis was going on.
Okay.
The fitna in Algeria. And he said
That was with fists and GIA. And
yeah,
all
yeah.
that stuff.
So he said, I'm writing this book so that people understand what the reality is, and they don't think that what's happening in Syria is legitimate, or sorry, in Algeria. But he pointed out that yes, the West is behind this stuff. They're funding this stuff, they're doing this kind of stuff. And he said, and again, this is going back so many years. He said, listen, what you are seeing, and you see the video. He's saying this in 1996. He's saying, what you're seeing in Algeria today, they're gonna bring to Syria in the future. They're going to bring this to Syria in the future. They're going to try to do the same thing to Syria.
Yeah, the foresight to know.
Yeah, so he knew this was going to happen, right? So people act all shocked when he's against it. It's like, well, where do you think? He's been warning about this for a good 15, 20 years.
Yeah, where have you been during this time?
And so he had to really, but he just stuck to his guns. And that's why, like, one of the discussions I had with Ustad Ali Filadi, where he asked me, he said, so what's happening with Imam al-Bouti in the situation with Syria? Is he like with the people? Is he with the regime? And I just looked at him and I said, no, he's just with the fiqh. He's like, yes, that's it. He's just siding with the fiqh. Because you go to read the fatwa, there's like 7 fatwa that stick out. And inshallah, I can translate and get published in the future. But if there's 7 fatwa that really stick out, and there's one fatwa where he's actually asked that question, like forthright. Someone asked him, like, who are you with? Are you in this side? And he's like, that's not the discussion. Yeah. My job is the fiqh. I have to stick to what Allah has said. That's all I care about. I don't care about it's with this, with that. Where does the truth? No, it's where does the truth lie? And he, like one of the prominent ones that he was asked, like, because people want to accuse him of being a pro-regime guy. One fatwa he received was where a Syrian soldier sent him a fatwa and said,
this was when the Sajjadat had like the likeness of Bashar al-Assad on it.
Oh no, this is another one. This is another fatwa. This fatwa was, the question. This fatwa was, I'm a Syrian soldier, and if I get told to shoot at demonstrators, and if I don't, I'm going to get killed. What do I do? Yeah. And Imam al-Bouti said, and this is quoting Bab al-Iqra, this is straight out of the fiqh books. He said, you cannot choose your innocent life over someone else's innocent life. You can't shoot the demonstrators. Yeah. You can't do it. That's yeah. Right. If you're going to die, you're going to die. You can't. You should say, well, I don't want to die, but
yeah, my life's more valuable.
More valuable. So you're looking at fatwa like that. You can see he's not taking sides. He's just staying with it. And it's like you look at that fatwa, and then you crack open Bab al-Iqra in any Shafi fiqh book. It's in, you can go al-Fiqh al-Minhaji, for example. Exact same thing is written there. The book of compulsion, if you want to, or force, if you want to translate it. So that was really a sad thing, that people just did not want to countenance that, the fact that this is what he'd been saying for so many years and so many years and so many. And even if you read some of it, and I read so many of his books after that and did so many lessons online. I did that book that we just discussed about jihad in Islam. I did his book on al-Qur'an. I did fiqh al-Sirah. Yeah. I did another book on was it al-Qur'an fiqh al-Sirah.
So these were pre-recorded lectures.
Yeah, from before. And there's one on, I did a whole one on Tariq al-Tashkil al-Islami. I did a whole online course and did an exam and so on and so forth. And these are all durus, like he's recording, like I saw his durus from like 1996. I saw his durus from like 2005. I saw his durus from 2009.
Wasn't there like a program, because you were going through these pre-recorded durus, yeah. And then when you finished these,
yeah, I did an exam.
You have like an exam that would check your proficiency.
Yeah.
And then after that, you had like a shahada or tazkiyah of
yeah.
You've completed this.
Yeah, so I did that in 5 books.
Oh, that's good.
I did that in 5 of his books. I got a certificate from the Jam Umayyah, and there's like a stamp from Sheikh Tawfiq, and alhamdulillah. So, but what I noticed in those durus is like every single durus, like when this issue of rising against the rulers comes up, and this is even before anything's even happened here. He's just telling, he's saying, listen, we can't remove a ruler unless he commits kufrun bawah. It has to be like outright uninterpretable kufr.
And he quoted, there was one point, he was in a gathering that I saw he was in, and he quoted a hadith in the Sahih from a Muslim, and then he gave the Sharh from Imam Nawawi.
Yeah, that's the one.
And he said, this is everything. I can't go any further than this, because like that's one of, if memory serves me correct in Shafi'i fiqh, it's like that's one of Imam Nawawi's, like that's one of his arjah aqwal. That's one of the strongest.
Yeah, there's that, but also the fact that he said that Imam Nawawi has quoted ijma on this issue. Imam Nawawi says there's a ijma on this issue that we cannot take out a rule unless it's from Bawa. And he said Imam Nawawi is thiqa. When he gives you, when he tells you it's ijma,
he's reliable.
That's it. You shut your mouth and
that's all you can do. Now, understanding that, then the quoting of Imam Nawawi and his discussing of the ijma, we understand. Okay, Imam al-Bouti's death. I remembered where I was, and you recounted where you'd been in the set of circumstances that evolved from there. There's a layer of this, a second layer to this that I won't fully be able to digest or understand from a fiqh standpoint. Imam al-Bouti's death, because you're a Shafi'i in fiqh, he was a Shafi'i Imam in fiqh. What was the outcome? Like, what did that represent? Like, how big of a void, like, did that leave for like Shafi'is globally or yourself or what have you? The death of this Imam.
It was heartache. It was just heartache at first.
Did you say like he was the Imam in this era of like, or among like the major Imams?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of Muraja in Syria,
yeah,
right. But like the statement, I think it's the statement is Ismail ibn Badran. Like he's the one who made that statement that you know.
They asked him like, who are the leaders of the
Muslims affairs?
And he started naming people.
Like who are the people who can speak on a global level?
Yes.
And that's Imam al-Bouti, and that's why around the same time, I've discussed before, and I've actually translated a section of it on my channel. On this channel, there's a. Like from Al-Azhar, like Sheikh Fatah Hijazi, they came together and they talked about, they canceled the classes.
They recalled all the scholars.
Yeah, and Fatah Hijazi gave a talk about Imam al-Bouti and what they remember of him and what he was like when he was at Al-Azhar. And he quoted, I forget the name of the Imam, there was some Imam where Imam al-Bouti was reading one of his books and there was like a masala that he couldn't understand. And then he went to that Imam's grave in Cairo and just made dua on that grave and said, oh, Allah, give me a fet, let me understand this. And then next day, sure enough, he knew what that masala meant.
Yeah, because I know I can say this: if Ismail ibn Badran or Abdurrahman al-Shami or Salih al-Shami or because I remember when Yasin al-Hiti, when he died, that was like a big blow to me. And plus I had to like move his name from like living to like previous martyrs. It's like that alone was like an unsettling issue. So it's like, I couldn't imagine like the ramifications of that, because these are like the senior imams of the school. So it's like, what, like the ramifications of that loss in terms of the fiqh and the fatawa and his understanding. It's like, what did you see from the scholars? What did they say about his placement in Islam? Like, what is our proper understanding of his rank in Islam and like his placement? Like, how do we see him?
Well, obviously, he is this marja, but he's seen, especially amongst the like the ulama of Syria, especially they regard him as like he's the Ghazali.
Right.
He's the Imam Ghazali of our age.
And anyone who understands Imam Ghazali understands that he was a mujaddid.
And we're singing as like a mujaddid, Hujjatul Islam, someone who's defending the faith, someone who's has their ear to the ground and knows what the piercing critical issues are and can address them. Right. So, and this is, I remember, like Brother Mahmoud explains to me. He said that his grandfather Imam Al-Bouti, he's like the Ghazali of the age, whereas Imam Muhammad Zuhayli, he was like the Suyuti.
Wow.
He was like the Suyuti. He passed away just a couple years after that.
It was like they were one after the other.
Yeah, just like 2 years later. So the way Imam Al-Bouti was, the fact that the way his life was structured, that he had obviously his students of Suhba and Lazum who were always with him. That would include like Sheikh Tawfiq, that would include his grandson, and then you have his university students, those doing BAs, PhDs,
Damascus University
students, the students in the Kulliyat al-Sharia, and then you'd have the people in Jami' al-Iman, these just the laity. So he has access to like every strata of society, right? So he knows exactly what's going on in all these issues. And he explained one time, because the book I translated, al-Kawniyyah, there's another section of that book that was originally the book that was taken out of later editions, all dealing with like dialectical materialism. And he explained one time, because he actually came across these kind of people at Damascus University. Right, people had these
secularist
mindset, all that materialism junk. So he said, yes, I came across university, and then I went away and I studied and then I came up with a book 2 years later, and boom, right? And initially that was part of al-Kawniyyah, but then it became published its own book, and it's almost a proper full-length book.
A good size, like a research. This was no longer just like a normal kitab on a number of topics or a topic. This was like a really dyed-in-the-wool like bahth.
Yeah.
proper research.
Yeah, and so that's his nature. So that's what he was. So he was always he was always that sort of that soothing, calming voice who was just there to answer all the questions, right? And I can stress his voice because it's like even my wife made this point to me, and I also said this to Brother Mahmoud when I met him. This idea that there's a hadith, I think it's da'if. I remember Sheikh Ayman Jablaghi and Jed, he quoted this in the end of, so he's doing Tafsir Surah Yusuf, and in the end of Surah Yusuf, where Allah talks about worshipping Allah bil basira.
Yes.
And he just, in his tafsir, that ayah, he said, he quoted, I think it's da'if, the hadith, but there's some sihha, the idea of when the meaning, he said, خَيْرُكُم مِّن رُؤْيَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ. Right? Like the best of you are those who when they're seen, Allah is remembered. All right? And my wife said something similar to me. She said, like, that, sometimes with Imam al-Bouti, he's one of those people, it's like when you hear his voice, you remember Allah.
Yeah.
That's the way. And I mentioned that to Imam al-Bouti, and he said, I'm not talking about his grandson, to Mahmoud, and he said, it's interesting you say that because when he went to Denmark, I don't remember this cartoon thing.
Yes.
Is it
Jylland's Post or something?
Jylland's Post, Jylland's Posten, they say that in Danish. So he went out to Denmark and he's with some other people and he spoke to the crowd and someone was translating for him. And he said, you know what? And there was some gathering of just Danish people, Danish men and women listening. And he said, some Danish people, they said the same thing. They couldn't understand a word he was saying, but they just loved hearing his voice. There was just something very, very soothing about his voice. Just like, yes. We're in the presence of a noble and righteous man.
He just had something about him that people were drawn to.
Yeah, just the way, just from his voice. So when he was martyred, and then that's when I think people like Sheikh Tawfiq had to sort of step up, and then he became he'd been there, but he'd kind of been in the wings, and he was. Yeah. It looked like he was kind of satisfied where he was in life, and then all of a sudden. He was like thrust. Yeah. The sun is like thrust into like this scorching light around press. And then he's there the day of his father's burial and they have to interview him about his father. It's like, that's the last thing as a son you probably want to be confronted with. But he has to answer these charges that someone walked up and did it. And it was all these other things. He has to answer all these doubtful matters, all these, just salacious rumors that are floating around. Yeah, so that's when he became like Rais. What was it? It was like a Jam'iyah of like the Imam Sham. Yeah. So he became the head of that organization, and then he had the issue. But one of the things he said, the beautiful things he said after his father had been martyred, is he made the point. He said, at least alhamdulillah, that when Allah took him, he was old. He was 84 years old. So he said, alhamdulillah, he lived a full life. He got so much done. He left so many books behind. When Brother Mahmoud met me, he said, because he came for Hajj a couple of years later, and I met him in Jeddah, and we spoke at length, and he said that, we're going over all of his audio visual material, all the videos and recordings. We've got something like 17,000 hours here. Right, huge. We have 17,000 hours of stuff it's going to take us years to put this out.
The interesting thing about that is when I remembered when I saw the footage that was after of like the pictures of what had happened, and they brought up the blood-covered mushaf that he was reading from the time. I remember because Uthman, when he was killed, his blood spattered on فَسِيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ. Right, Allah will deal with him. Right, that ayah, right, was where the blood had spattered on. His one was those who reject faith, neither their children nor their wealth will avail them at all. Like that's the ayah, and the page was like slightly folded over, but you could see that was the ayah. Wow. That the blood was on. I thought, subhanallah.
Yeah, and the ayah. There's another ayah he'd been teaching as well. I think it's on the blog. I forget now. There's another ayah that he'd been teaching just before that. I think discussing, but I remember Sheikh Fatah Hijazi. He also made that point that he said that this is a man who lived a full life. Was he 88? 84. So he lived a full life. He gave so many fatwa, gave so many durus, and then before he died, like he's at an age where you expect him to die of quote unquote natural causes. But he said, but so Fatah Hijazi said that he honored him with knowledge his entire life, and then he honored him with shahada at the end of it, just to give him that double honor. And one of the things that maybe people aren't aware of so much is that look where he's buried. Like Allah put him, Allah was willed that he be buried right next to Imam Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. And when I met Brother Mahmoud in Jeddah, he said that yes, we came across this old document written in Turkish, like written in Turkish from like 800 years ago, and it said in that document that sometime in the future a righteous man will be buried next to Imam Salahuddin al-Ayyubi.
Subhanallah.
That's going back like 800 years. So that's just what Allah willed.
Huge.
So I think this is one of the things. I think he's also coming forward now. Imam al-Bouti, he's coming forward as he's someone who I think the true appreciation of who he was is going to come and grow later.
Yes.
Right? Like while he was alive.
After the fact.
Like while he was alive, people don't really. But because that's the thing. I was always firmly convinced that. I said because that's how I was. I was in contact with Mahmoud, and you and I were talking. I thought, there's so much heat against him. There's so much heat on people who are so affiliated with him in this time. But I said, like, when he passes away, and as time, then people are going to realize that's what Imam al-Bouti was. Yeah. It's going to come clear. And you're seeing that, like I remember, like at the time, if you go back to the time of his death, his YouTube channel was quite small.
Sure.
It was like maybe 25,000 people, 24,000 people. Now it's up to like 10 times that number. It's like 250,000 now, and it's just growing and growing.
Exponential growth, like every day.
Yeah, every day is more growth. And again, remember they have 17,000 hours of material.
Yes, I'm just constantly uploading it, replenishing it,
putting in more and more clips, and that's what's happening, and that's why I see that now with like now bring the books out now when I do stuff and I translate his videos and put them on my channel. There's a lot more. I think a lot more desire for that stuff, and people come on and say, "Oh, please do more videos by the Imam," and that's not what people were saying 8 years ago.
That was not the notion those years ago. There was a much more hawkish notion people had. Of Al-Bouti. How much is not necessarily in physical looks, but how much like Imam al-Bouti is the Imam's son in terms of his rulings and his mashrab, like his behavior and such?
Well, Sheikh Tawfiq is very much like his son. Is very much like his father, but he's not.
I don't think he yet has the same gravitas.
Yeah, he doesn't have the same gravitas. He doesn't have that effect like when he walks into a room, so to speak. But he definitely has. He definitely has the humility. He definitely has that patience. He definitely has that. He has a bit of that haiba as well.
Yeah.
And he's just done. I think he's done exceptionally well, considering the circumstances, to bring out rulings. And that's the other thing. The beautiful thing about these people, I would say, is that I've been in touch with Mahmoud for a little while there, and then even after that, because I think if you remember back at that time from around 2011 onwards, I was translating books in fiqh for the brothers in Malaysia.
Yes.
So I was doing like the book on Waqf. I was doing Imam Nawawi's book on Adab al-Muslim Mustafti. I was doing Kitab al-Haram by Imam Ghazali. Yeah. But especially with the Waqf book and those later books, I was regularly in touch with like Mahmoud, getting questions, and he was asking his dad to explain stuff to me. We're going over stuff like we had to go into the issues of what is what is Salat al-Wusta in the Shafi madhab, because Imam Shafi was saying it was Fajr because there's Qunut al-Qanitin, but then like Imam Nawawi and others like, no, it's going to be Asr, right? So that's why you see my acknowledgments to those books. I'm saying like I'm thanking them because they're coming to my aid despite the situation they're in, despite the fact that there's a civil war going on, despite the fact that they've lost their grandfather. They're still.
And you found him proficient.
Oh, absolutely.
Well-versed. Because, again, just as there had been criticisms against Imam al-Bouti himself, there were other strange criticisms levied and lobbed against his son.
Yeah. Because there's one horrible rumor that was passed around that they said that he had, well, obviously while Mahmoud was still alive, some people passed a rumor around that Sheikh Tawfiq had like broken with his dad and fled to Jordan.
Yeah. Which was weird because he's walking around in broad daylight.
Yeah, which didn't make any sense because someone tried to raise that issue to me in an email, and I said, no, look at the Nassim Hasham website. Sheikh Tawfiq posted a fatwa this morning on the Nassim Hasham website, and everything's carrying on as normal. It's like, yes, but what if the Mukhabarat took it over? And it's like, you really think some intelligence agency have taken over the Nassim Hasham website and they're writing the fatwa now, and there's no discernible difference in quality?
There's someone from Langford, Massachusetts. Leavenworth, Kansas is like writing out these like detailed rulings and quoting like the Mashhur and Zahir rulings
Yeah.
in the madhab.
Yeah, and some guy in Langley, Virginia, he wrote the khutbah from last week from Jam. Yes. Or even it was Syrian intelligence. They're not ulama, they're not fuqaha. What are they going to do?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell when, never mind like secular agencies trying to speak on behalf of Islam, you can tell when people are impersonating being scholars that try to write on something. Oh, this person's illegitimate.
Yeah.
You can tell that, let alone like some secular foreign agency. I asked about Sheikh Tawfiq just because there'd been rumors swirling about that, and then also that he wasn't knowledgeable, that he didn't have ilm and things like this. So,
But his own father appointed him as a successor. I mean, you saw the video yourself, and you told me about that, where he said, the person most like me is my son.
yeah, so it's like, well, why would he, if he wasn't as knowledgeable as people, as his father had said, or what have you, why would the fathers make those statements? And then why would you have a panel of scholars say, he's the best among us? What does it say about that gathering of like Syrian scholars?
They make him like the head of the Syrian Scholars Union. Yeah, that's what it's called. Ittihad Ulama Sham. That's the organization. He was the Rais at that time.
Yeah, so it's just very strange. Now I want to look at one more thing as well before we move into the book. I want to understand what was significant about his writings and his legacy. Like, how far and wide, how well distributed was his written legacy? First of all, I want to start with, just as sort of a general estimate, how many books, full-length books, do you think he's written?
I think it was between 50 and 60.
50 and 60. And of fatwa, because I remember when his fatwa website was up, before it came down, the fatwas were on like 7,000 something.
Yeah, yeah.
So do you have like a general number since that time of how many fatwa you think he'd issued? Diverse topics.
Probably thousands. I mean, even from the Nassim Hasham website, just in the last 5 years of his life, like, or 4 years, like from 2009, 2000, in that period, and there's I think Nassim Hasham, the brothers, they put it together in one book. Even that's like a good 700 fatwa. That's just in the last few years of his life.
Yeah,
a good 700, 800 fatwa, something like that. So. But again, with Nassim Hasham, that's not just him. That's also Sheikh Tawfiq giving fatwa. That's got Sheikh Abu Hashami's on there.
They had a good sort of gathering of different people. One from the Hanabila, Shafi's on there.
Muhammad
Hanafi,
Muhammad Faham from the Hanafi. So he was definitely proficient, and then his books just covered so many different aspects, because he just always thought about things. But again, the thing, like a difference, it's good to compare him to say the Imam Muhammad Zuhaili, because Imam Muhammad Zuhaili is the writer. Like you don't find a lot of public lessons from him.
Yeah. He's one of my teachers called him al-Mawsu'.
Yeah,
the encyclopedia.
Yeah,
refer to him as that. He's the encyclopedia.
Yeah, so there's video of him where he talked about, like, he would sometimes just write 18 hours a day, and that's how he's producing like a 14-volume comparative fiqh.
He wrote just prodigiously.
Yeah, a 17-volume tafsir book and so forth. Whereas Imam al-Bouti, like, I think the longest book he has maybe is his 4-volume translation tafsir, Shad of the Hikam, of al-Taweel, which is 4 volumes, and I think that's transcribed from his durus. So, and the nature of his durus, like there were a lot of things that he kept that he was known to always stress on, and he always stressed coming back to Allah, admitting and acknowledging your slavehood to Allah, your absolute destitution before Allah. That was like a common theme that he kept coming back to. You have to recognize who you are before Allah, and why Allah created you, and why you exist. He kept sort of bringing that back, even no matter what he was discussing. Even the Hikam al-Taweel, or he's going to a fiqh issue, he's going to a creedal issue. He's always trying to bring you back to, like, you just have to remember who you are before Allah, and don't lose sight of that. And that's again why this is a big portion of this book in front of us. So he covered books in theology, he covered books in fiqh, because his main books were he had the fatwa book, and he has the Qadaya Fiqhiyya Mu'asira, where he's going into more depth, like Bahuth on modern fiqh issues, like what's a modern understanding of waqf, and how can we revive waqf, all these kinds of things.
Being muqim and Darul Kufr.
Yeah, these big issues. So if you compare him to, unlike Shaykh Muhammad Zuhaili or Imam Mustafa Bagha, for example, he hasn't written like a fiqh textbook.
Yes.
But he's dealt with a lot of fiqh issues and fatwa issues.
But I think what he has done, probably with because you have certain muraji' who their written legacy is really huge, but maybe they're not prodigious speakers, or they're not ubiquitous speakers. Then you'll get some who are ubiquitous speakers, and if you were to gather their written addresses together, it would equal a book or a series of books. Or
that's absolutely
it would equal that. So I think in sort of balancing al-Bouti against az-Zuhaili, looking at these two together and comparing, it's similar to what you look at with like Imam Salih al-Shami versus Imam Abdul Rahman al-Shami. It's like Abdul Rahman al-Shami is like answering all these rulings and quoting the Matalib and things like this, whereas Ahmad Shami is hadith heavy.
Yeah.
So you're going to find him like in hadith, but you won't find Abdul Rahman al-Shami discussing this, even though they both have their specializations, but one of them's like leaning towards one area, one of them's leaning towards another.
Yeah, exactly, and they're trying to address different needs. I think they're trying to see like what can I contribute to and bring out. So Imam al-Bouti, so he had like a Taif, he had al-Kawniyyah and Creed. That's seen as like that's an upper intermediate, pretext. But then he also had these books about like Ulum al-Qur'an. He had a book about, because he was trying to defend the Qur'an. He said there's people saying stuff about the Qur'an, so I need to address that. So that's what he tends to do, is like he'll teach a subject, like he'll teach Ulum al-Qur'an, or he'll write a book on Ulum al-Qur'an or on theology, but then he'll bring contemporary issues into it.
Right.
So like he'll give you theology, but we have to discuss evolution theory.
Yes.
We have to understand epistemology.
Yeah.
How do we know that our theology is true?
Yeah.
How do we know that it's valid?
Right. All these points,
Right.
Cosmology, cosmogony.
Yeah, and then same thing with like Ulum al-Quran or with Fiqh al-Sirah. Like Fiqh, that's another brilliant book that he brought out, where he brought out, and it's called Fiqh al-Sirah because you can't really translate that, because Fiqh al-Sirah is like, is it the jurisprudence of the Bible? No, it's not that. It's yes, there are ahkam that he's deriving from the Sirah.
Yeah.
He shows, but he's also showing how to understand the Sirah.
Yeah, and then how to carry it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if someone follows that, because he has in there something about the minhaj of khilafah.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be implemented.
Yeah, and there's a whole
and
section.
He lays out the three ways. And
Yeah, and he shows you about, he gives you like a nabdha about the life of Bakr as-Siddiq anhu, and then Omar, what happened in the age of the Khulafa al-Rashidin. So when you talk about Ulum al-Quran, he said we can't talk about Ulum al-Quran unless we talk about, okay, how is the Quran gathered?
Yes.
How do we know that it's verified? How do we know it's true? What are the Sabat al-Ahruf? What are the
channels did it reach us through?
What do we mean by mutawatir? Stressing this point. So he just really did so much tajdeed and of this for this last age, and really defended the faith so like spectacularly well, with so many writings, with so many speeches, and he also debated people as well. Like sometimes where you can see him, some videos where he's had to deal with like secularists in Syria when they have issues with the madhabs, and they want to do away with usul fiqh.
They want to dispense with the very heart and root of Islam. Then as a final point then on this area, what was the general reception of Imam al-Bouti's books in terms of the wider Muslim world? You've been in Morocco.
Yeah.
You've been in Jeddah.
Yeah.
You've been these different far-flung locations. When you've been in these places, what was the reception upon hearing Imam al-Bouti's name spoken? What were people's reception of his books? Did you find them on sale? Did you find scholars speaking of them, commenting upon them, making use of them? What did you see in your travels in Dar al-Islam where you'd been?
Well, I think in Morocco he was well respected. Absolutely, in Morocco he was respected, and I think he'd even been to Morocco just before I moved there. I think he was invited by the king to do some what they call the Durus Hasaniyah. That was one of the things I think. One of the things that Muhammad, because it's something that Muhammad said is changed from his father Hassan. I think Hassan Thani, he used to do the durus, but then as the king, he'd be sat up on like some elevation.
Yes.
And then the faqih would low down. Whereas Hassan Thani was Muhammad said, he switched that around.
Oh,
so he sits on the floor with the people, and the faqih is on the chair, and he's giving a dars and so on and so forth. So I think Imam al-Bouti, he did one of those, and he was just well respected. His books were available. Like I bought. Like his Fatawa books, other books, I got them in bookshops. Like so, it's like when I wanted to study al-Kawniyyah with Ustad Ali Filadi, like I had my copy that I'd procured from some brothers in Europe, but I was going to go to a bookshop and easily get a copy for him.
Okay, so what you could tell, I mean, you met one of the big maraji of Morocco.
Yeah, that's Sheikh Mohammed Taweel. Yeah,
you met his student.
Yeah,
you've seen other people. Their understanding of him and his works and his written legacy was favorable.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember when I went one time with the Ustad Ali Filali when we went to meet Sheikh Muhammad at-Taweel. We went to his house, and Ustad Filali gave me like a description of him. He said, this is Ustad at-Taweel. He's our big fiqhi, he's our big usuli, and I've known him since the 70s and all this time. So I just said, so he's like your Imam al-Bouti, and he said exactly.
Yeah, subhanallah.
That's how we regard him, and I remember we arrived at the house, and we rung some sort of like Tweety Bird doorbell type thing, and then there was like this like a maid came out, and she said like, who is it? And he's like and the I just stands there. He says, Ali Filali, right? So we're waiting, and we're sort of waiting for. We thought that maybe she'd go in and then she'd come back out and say, okay, you can come in. Yeah. So we're waiting at the gate, because there's like a gate, and then you have to go through, and there's like a little garden, and then there's the house. And we're waiting, and then like a few minutes later, the sheikh himself comes out. He comes out and he's got like his cane, and he just sticks his head out. He's like, Ali Filali. And then as soon as he saw him, he just got really happy. He just like ran through the gate, just hugged him, just like kissing him all over his head, like, so happy to see you, right? And then I'm like wow, and he's like, and I think like, these guys go back maybe like 40 years.
That would probably be the equivalent of had you seen Imam Bouti, something like how you would have felt, all the different feelings going through your, oh wow, this, I've been translating this man's rulings, reading his books and everything else. You would have felt as if I've known this man. But inshallah, I mean, you'll meet Sheikh Tawfiq, which will be something like that. You'll still something of that. Inshallah. You still have access to these people. Yeah, but it's definitely a case where you see definitely love, because I mean, it's almost like father and son, and then there's more than that, because it's just because those two are going back 40, like almost 40 years. Yeah, decades. Right. So that was beautiful to see. And then we went inside and we sat with the sheikh, some tea, and then he gave me some of his books, which I'm translating now. I translated a couple of them going through. So it's nice when you look back at it, you see how everyone's sort of everyone fits. Everyone's sort of linked in. It fits up. And everyone has these connections. It's all of this is significant because I mean, this book that you've translated, I think, is both not only a worthy effort and an important effort, but it's kind of like, because how I view this introductory topic, because I thought we'd like use this introduction and go into it, but I can see we've gone like way over time. I think this is like part 1. So we'll have to come back with like part 2. But this is kind of like a celebration of his life. Like his written legacy, his intellectual legacy, what people have taken away from him, how they've benefited from what he's given the ummah at large, people's perception of him. And as you rightly said, it won't be until the dust fully clears, where the dust settles and the smoke clears, that people will really be able to appreciate Imam al-Bouti in full light of his contributions to his ummah. He's already appreciated by the scholars, no doubt. But the rank and file, I think there's a certain class of them that, because they're being distracted by other people who are not worthy and other problems, I think they're missing out on what they could really take away from this Imam. So inshallah, hopefully what we've done today and what we'll do in our next presentation, that will, even if it's some small speck or some small point towards helping to clear that dust, helping to clear that fog, inshallah, we'll be among those people. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So I say, Subhanakallahumma wa hamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, innahu ghafurur rahim.